morning, everyone. I'm very much honored and excited to be a part of this wonderful forum. I think I should try to speak a little bit slowly because someone will be translating into Thai as I speak.
Yes.
Well, thank you for translating. I'm sorry that we cannot meet in person yet, but I'm very happy to see many friends again. And I hope to visit you soon in the future. So I'd like to introduce my friends who contributed to the stories I will tell you today. There are photos of the friends on my first slide, but you can't see. But I'm Yoshiro Miyata, and my student Maho Suzuki, she helped me in this research. My colleague Tomohiro Ueshiba at Chukyo University, and my friend Alex Ho, originally from Hong Kong. He did the nice illustrations in my slides. So I'd like to start with two stories about some people who overcame boundaries that suppressed their creativity. Am I speaking in right speed? Am I too fast or too slow?
It's perfect.
Okay. So the first story is in a workplace. It's a community of craftsmen. The second story is in a school, a handcraft workshop for university students. I'd like to tell these stories not because of their creative achievements, but because of what they learned through the experiences that have changed the way they work and also their daily lives. So I'm showing my third slide. I hope you can share my slides.
Can you export them into PDF? Would that make it easier?
Okay, I'll try. So I hope. Okay, PDF.
ขอบคุณอาจารย์ประดิษฐ์สำหรับคำแนะนำนะคะ
I'm exporting my slides to PDF now, and
yeah, let's share again from PDF.
Through the messenger.
Or you can share PDF directly from your.
Oh, okay.
laptop.
I try that. I hope the animations will work. I should open the PDF first. Just a moment. Okay. So I just opened the PDF and I'm going to share it here.
Okay.
What's that? It's working?
We saw the photos. Yes.
Okay, so that
probably the animation might not come together. It's okay.
Okay, so hopefully. So that was my first slide with for the photos of the 4 people who contributed. And this is my second slide, which I already talked about. And I'd like to discuss some implications for education and society. And that's my third slide. So it's a story of a paper box studio community, and the designer is meeting discussing with the manager of the studio. And the designer joined the studio hoping to do something useful. But initially, he didn't know what he was expected to design, which is very unusual for a designer, because usually a designer starts designing something when he is asked to design something. And so he tried to come up with something he could do, something useful for the studio. And initially, no one had any idea whatsoever he could do in the studio. And so one day, the manager mentioned to him that he was concerned that the way they calculate the prices of their products was not very clear. So the designer thought that maybe he could design a new tool to calculate the prices of the products. Initially, the people in the studio were not cooperating because they didn't know what he could do. And so he went around and talked to people. Then one day, some craftsmen got interested in the tool and started helping the designer. Then one by one, people started to get interested in the tool. And at the end, they all collaborated together to design and improve the tool. So what was happening? The designer was actually, at that time, a doctoral student at the Future University Hakodate and Yasunori Sannomiya. And he thought that this was very interesting design process. It was very unusual. So he decided to analyze the process in detail, and he interviewed many people. And this is from his doctoral dissertation. And today I'd like to tell you my interpretation, my analysis of this, his interesting data. So when an organization is small, everyone can communicate and collaborate. But when an organization grows bigger, we try to divide it into smaller modules to work more efficiently, and so that each member understands only a small part of the process, and they can work more efficiently. And when we make modules, we also start to make boundaries in our minds about what we can do. And the boundaries are not visible. It's inside our mind, and we are not conscious of the boundaries we are making. But they make us, they enable us to work more efficiently, because we can concentrate on small parts of the process. But the problem is that boundaries make us believe that we can do very small things. And so boundaries limit our beliefs about what we can do. And we start to believe that we cannot do things outside the boundaries. So, it becomes difficult for us to share our problems, and it becomes difficult to collaborate across the boundaries to solve our problems. So this was what was happening when the designer started join the community. So the customer wasn't happy because she wanted the salesperson to tell her the value of the products. And the salesperson wasn't happy either because he wanted to explain reasons for the price, but he didn't know why they have that price. And the craftsman wasn't happy either because he wanted the salesperson to understand the values of their works. And the manager wasn't happy either because he wasn't sure that if the price was right. He didn't know how to set the prices. So then he mentioned that his concern to the designer without any explicit request or expectation for the designer to design something. But the designer thought maybe he could design something and started to talk to people. He went around and around, and it took some time to communicate with the people. But some members found potentials in the tool to realize their wishes. For example, some craftsmen thought that the tool may reflect the value of their works. So they decided to help the designer measure the time to finish their works, which will be used to calculate the labor cost. And the salesperson started to realize that the tool may be very useful for him because they can use it to explain the value of the products to the customers. So he tried to use it. And also the customer was very happy to see the tool because she could now appreciate the values of the craftsmen, what they were doing. And the manager was happy because he thought that the tool would help younger members to understand the crafts better. And another member thought that he could examine the production in detail and possibly improve it. He never imagined he could do something like that. So one by one, the members discovered the potentials of the tool to realize their wishes and started to help. And because everyone understood one step of the crafts, other than anyone else, so everyone could contribute to the design of the tool. And also no one understood the whole process before. So everyone could learn something from the design of the tool. So they all started to collaborate to design the tool together, and it started to blur their boundaries one by one as they collaborate and communicate with each other. And this transformed the community into a new community who can learn collaboratively. So that's the end of the first story. And the second story is what happened in one of my classes. And I was surprised to find that most of my students don't create anything in their daily lives. Even they study engineering, they don't create in their daily lives. I was kind of shocked, and I asked why. They answered that they didn't think they could make anything useful. It takes too much time and energy, and it's not efficient. It's more efficient to buy something, and it's not fun. So, and I also asked them about SDGs, and most students answered that they feel SDGs are important, but not many of them thought that they could contribute to the goals because they have little to do with what they do in their daily lives. That's what they thought. So together with Maho Suzuki, who my student, we came up with a workshop. And because the class was online, students were working at home. So we decided to use whatever they found at their homes. So we asked students to find something in their homes that they thought they could use to make something. And so they chose like bottles, cans, cardboards, boxes, bags, anything. And we sort of put photos, shared photos on online, and we did brainstorming about what we could make out of them. And everyone created something that they needed or wanted using these kind of wastes or garbage. And I was surprised, I and Maho were surprised that they actually enjoyed creating something. And out of 40 students, 13 said that they enjoyed finding uses for the wastes, and 15 enjoyed trying and error to improve their creations. And 12 mentioned they enjoyed to expand their ideas. They also discovered that wastes are usable, and they could use many other things they discovered. And they also discovered potentials of the materials they use, like bottles and cans and cardboards. And many said that they want to create more in their daily lives. And it was also surprising that most students now thought they could and were motivated to contribute to the SDGs, which means they found connections to the society. So it was a very interesting change. So Maho and I interviewed many students, and this is one example of the change in the mindset of one student. Student A got curious to go beyond her boundary of usable things to try to use. She actually used a beer can to create a flower vase, and it was a challenge for him, for her, to create something from the waste. And she liked what she created, but she was motivated to challenge creating. And this experience blurred her boundary of usable things and expanded her scope of usable things. And when she reflected upon this experience, she discovered that she reduced wastes, and she actually saved energy for mass production because she didn't have to buy mass-produced products. So she actually was able to reduce carbon emission. So she saw that she discovered that her life is actually connected to the society, and her behavior can contribute to the society. So, and her boundary of doable things expanded. And so through this experience, she found that she has no boundary for creativity. And her daily lives are now connected to the society. This was a very simple version of the analysis, but actually there are many, many steps in which she sort of expanded one boundary at a time, one by one, and until she connected with the society and started to contribute to the society. And I and Maho interviewed many other students, and each one had different pattern of expanding their scope of doables and usables. So that's the and we interviewed many, we analyzed many students, and we compared the mindsets before the workshop and after the workshop. So before the workshop, in living in modern society, they have products, many products available, so that whenever they need something, they can buy. So they don't need to create anything. And that makes a boundary to separate themselves from the society, to make their lives more efficient. And then they start to depend on products, and they don't make anything in their daily lives. So the boundaries disconnect them from the society, and they are not motivated to contribute. But after during the workshop, they created something, and seeing the result of action, they found that the actions are actually connected to the society, and they start to blur the boundaries. And then their scopes of the doable expand, and which makes them motivated to do more creative actions. So this way, they get connected to the society. Their daily lives are connected to that society and motivated to contribute to the society. So that's the end of my second story. I have about 14 minutes, 30 minutes left, right? Okay. I have actually the third story. The first two stories were very sort of small stories of some local people, but the third story is actually a story of Homo sapiens, hundreds of thousands of years, of how we created boundaries in our society. And I have to make a very complex story very, very simple. So I go very fast. Hunter-gatherer society, everyone was a producer and a consumer. So living was surviving by creative collaboration. So they have to be efficient to survive, and they have to be creative to be efficient. So being efficient means being creative. When the farming society started around 11,000 years ago, the society was divided into producer module and consumer module. And very few consumers stopped producing their foods, their daily lives. But they still depended on many producers. A majority of the people were producers and who continued creative collaboration to make their living. But the boundaries they started to make between nations and religions started to create global issues like slavery, colonial relation, and also destruction of other nations or ecosystems. And here we live in industrial society. So now we divide between professionals and non-professionals. And there are a few professional producers, and most people depend on the products the producers, very small number of producers produce for a living. And we make boundaries between our lives. We can separate our lives from the society, and so that we can have a very efficient life, but not creative. So that's a very simple summary of the history, and but we can compare what's happening in business and in schools. In industry societies, life is divided into working and learning. So working in business, modularized works for efficiency. So like professionals, companies, divisions. And we transfer products between the modules, and we need to evaluate products' value efficiently. So we use the cost or the money to measure the product's value. But the cost don't reflect the value of the works that went into creating them. So it is very difficult to work creatively, like in the community that we saw in the first story. We can see very similar pattern in our schools. We modularize learning for efficiency into schools, classes, subjects, so that we can teach efficiently. So, and we transfer knowledge from a teacher to students and researcher to teachers. And the students become the products of the schools. And we need to evaluate the students, the products of the schools efficiently. And we use scores. So we started to measure learning by scores, and the scores become learning. But that create in the student's mind boundaries that what they can do, so they can no longer create knowledge by themselves. And that makes it difficult for them to learn creatively, like in the students in my class before the workshop. So how can we learn create more creatively or work creatively? How can we regain connection with the society and contribute creatively? The first two stories I told you today suggest some interesting hints. We don't have to make big goals and try to achieve them. Also, we don't have to fight with our boundaries because there's no boundary to start with. But they are also just inside our minds. And we have to remember that living is connecting with people, and tools, and ecosystems around us. So this is what we call local domestic products, LDP for short, which means creating what we need for living using local resources. So our approach is a graceful shift from GDP to LDP. So we can try to create what we need locally at home, in community, and in schools. So we can cook our meals, grow our foods, build our furniture, ride our bicycle, etc. And we can share our creations with families and friends. And we can ask professionals for help so that they don't have to monopolize creativity. They can share their skills and knowledge with us and to collaborate. And we can grow a network of creators, not modules of creators, but a network of creators who can exchange knowledge and skills. So I'm about to end my presentation, but I think I have time to show my last two slides, which is a response to what's happening in the world right now. I think LDP can end COVID-19 because we can move from big cities to rural areas where we can have more local resources, right? So then big cities will become less populated and less dependent on global businesses, and which will make viruses difficult to spread. So maybe we could end COVID-19 with LDP. And also, we have very difficult situation for world peace now. And we have modularized our world into communities and nations with boundaries. So the world is more efficient and convenient for us to live, but it is very difficult to communicate between communities and nations because of the boundaries we have in our minds, and which makes it difficult to collaborate and solve global issues together. So the question is, can we blur these boundaries to collaborate for a peaceful world? I think yes, with LDP, by creating our lives with our hands again. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for translating. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much Professor Yoshiro Miyata นะคะขอบพระคุณมากค่ะก็เป็นหัวข้อที่เปิดประเด็นความคิดหลายอย่างมากเลยนะคะขณะที่คุณลูกตาก็ฟังไปด้วยแล้วก็บางทีได้มุมใหม่ค่ะว่าบางทีการที่เราพยายามจะทำให้มีประสิทธิภาพมากขึ้นนะคะมันกลับกลายเป็นสร้างข้อจำกัดที่ทำให้เราเรียกว่ามีข้อจำกัดในการที่จะสร้างสรรค์อะไรมากขึ้นด้วยนะคะก็อันนี้เป็นมุมที่ยังไม่เคยนึกในจุดนี้มาก่อนก็ในช่วงเวลานี้นะคะเรามีเวลาที่จะสามารถให้คอมเมนต์นะคะหรือว่าคำถามนะคะเดี๋ยวนะคะสามารถให้คำถามนะคะหรือว่าจะเป็นสิ่งที่เราให้ใจนะหมายถึงสิ่งที่เราฟังแล้วเรารู้สึกกดไลค์เลยอันนี้เรารู้สึกว่าเห็นด้วยแล้วก็ชื่นชอบสามารถบอกได้ด้วยนะคะว่าเรื่องอะไรเรื่องที่เติมเต็มนะคะฟังแล้วเรามีความ
share what you thought about, which would also be like a gift to Professor Yoshiro.
ที่จะเรียกว่าอยากได้ข้อมูลเพิ่มเติมหรือให้ความกระจ่างเพิ่มเติมเราก็จะเปิด
ask whatever you would like clarification for.
feedback หรือว่า comments ใดๆสามารถยกมือได้เลยนะคะ
You can raise your hand.
มี comments มาอยู่ในแชทนะคะ
There are some comments in the chat.
ว่าอาจารย์ประดิษฐ์นะคะกรุณาให้ความเห็นค่ะบอกว่าเห็นด้วยกับLDP concept นะคะว่าแล้วก็เป็นคำถามนะคะว่า local domestic
I agree with LDP concept.
สร้างขอบเขตนะ
LDP will create
ระหว่าง
boundaries
local
between.
community หรือเปล่าอันนี้เป็น
But there's a question if LDP will create boundaries.
Asking will he totally agree with the LDP, and the question is, will local domestic products will create boundary between each local communities? That's a question to you.
Okay, that's a very good question. Thank you. Not necessarily, because if we do LDP, we try to use our local resources, and less dependent on resources from other communities. And the communities is a sort of a word that implies boundary. But we don't have to have boundaries around our community, because it's difficult to explain. The ecosystem has no boundary, right? So when we talk about boundary, we as soon as we start talking about community, we already have a boundary in our mind. So let's not use the word community. We can make our living using the ecosystem around us, and we don't have to create any boundary of our local environment, right? There's no boundary in the mountains or in the rivers. And so we can go to the mountain near where we live and meet other people from the other side of the mountain and share the resource in the mountain. Because there's no boundary in the mountain dividing our community. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but instead of using community, maybe you can use the word network of friends and families and friends. Then we don't have to make any boundary.
Interesting. So that's you're saying that boundary is something in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
and it's to me, it's like it's nice to be aware of this word, that it could cause the separation
Mm-hmm.
and the limitation. And instead of looking at the boundary or trying to set the group of something,
Mm-hmm.
instead we replace that idea with the word network.
Mm-hmm.
That empower connectivity,
Mm-hmm.
empower friendship. That's what I heard from you. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so. Oh, I couldn't hear your voice.
Sorry, I read chat in Thai.
Oh, okay.
Ajahn Pradit just asking you in the chat saying that I do understand your concept that when people have more LDP mindset, they will bond and share in the networking community. Am I correct? That's the question.
Yes, I think so, because when you are creating something you need using local resources, whatever you find in your local environment, and also human resources, you find your friend and your family around you. There's no need to make boundary like people in another community or resource of someone else, because you can share with whoever people around you, whatever resources you find around you, and you can collaborate. So yes, I think so.
คุณลูกตามีอาจจะเป็น
I have kind of a question and maybe like the continuous of the thinking. I think on the perception of the school that when we have a frames on the boundary on the subject and teach students only when they are in the classroom is the way to set up the boundary as well, because we only kind of like teach them the letter and the thing of what we think, but if we want to expand the boundary,
จริงๆข้างนอก
maybe we
แพงของห้องเรียน
can bring students to the field trip outside the class to learn more about the local occupation, connect with the world. For example, at the SIL, we do something or create project that help improving the society. This is the example of the expanding of the boundary to the society to me. To me, it's like the more we kind of like connect student with the society, is the more students can connect themselves to the society and expand. The more we disconnect ourselves in the small place, we only be able to see ourselves in the small place. So when we unlock ourselves, we will see the world bigger. It's something that depends on the point of view of myself. This is my reflection.
You hear me in English translation, right?
Oh yes, I totally agree with you. And when we try to teach our students only in the school classrooms, the classrooms are designed to separate the students from outside school, right? So it is very difficult to bring in what's meaningful outside the school into the classroom. So as you said, it's very useful to bring students to field trips outside the school in the society. And experience how they can be connected to the society. But I think it is very important that they can connect their daily lives with the society. So not just their learning in school, but also what they do in their homes with their families, what they eat with the society. And the schools are designed so that the students can't bring individual something meaningful to each individual, because that will make the class very difficult to teach if students bring what are meaningful to their daily lives. So, but as I said in the second story, because the class was online, the students were all in their homes. And that was very useful to bring their what are meaningful to them into the class. So they can share what they find interesting with each other. Like we are meeting in online like what we do now, and we could see their rooms. And in their rooms, they have many things that they are interested in. So we can talk about those, and which we could never do in classes inside school. And so each student can talk about what they are interested, because they have many things in their rooms to talk about. And that was very, very useful, I think. And so I think we can we learned because of the COVID, we can do many interesting things online because we can connect our local environment. So I can share my workbench and lots of things that I'm interested in.
Is that your Fab Lab?
Yes. This is the basement of my home. And this is where I work. I made my desk chair here. Mm-hmm. And it is very interesting because when I'm working on a sort of academic paper, I come up with something interesting and I make something here, and then that will help me writing my paper. Right?
It seems like two different things, but somehow it's like connected to each other.
Yes, yes. So yeah, when I try to make something, I can think about sort of what's happening in my mind.
Yeah.
And then I can go to the keyboard and write my reflection, mm-hmm. and then go back to the creative works. Maybe I can share you something that I'm working on around here.
Yes, please.
Can I? I hope the connection works. Wi-Fi works.
Yeah.
Uh,
We all try our best to stay connected. Yeah, you can share with us. เอาไปละ น่าสนใจว่าเหมือนบางทีพอเราทำอะไรที่ประดิษฐ์สร้างอยู่แล้วก็กลายเป็นเกิดไอเดียเพิ่มขึ้นตอนที่อาจารย์เขียนงานวิชาการนะคะเมื่อกี้ที่อาจารย์แชร์
Am I still connected? Can you?
Yes.
Oh, good.
You were frozen a little bit earlier, and now you're back.
Okay. So no, I need to change my microphone because this is I need to move my computer
Okay.
around. Yes. I hope it will work. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
But the signal is a little bit shaking now.
Yes.
Let's try.
Yeah. So I'm on my Wi-Fi now.
Okay.
And I'm going to show you my compost system just outside my office.
ได้ไปเที่ยวญี่ปุ่นเลยนะคะพวกเรา นางโอย่า
Can you see?
Yes.
This is my compost system.
น้องจุนเราสามารถ stop sharing จากเครื่องอาจารย์โยชิโร่ได้ไหมเราจะได้แล้วก็พิน
Should I?
Can you stop sharing the slide so we can see you in the bigger picture?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So this is my compost. I put our kitchen garbage, kitchen waste into here. You can see inside.
Oh, you made your own compost.
Yes. Using scrap wood, and I put rice bran and rice husks and all our kitchen waste here, and this is a temperature sensor, so that I can monitor. And I think it's about 60 degrees Celsius. It's very hot.
50.
About 50.
Oh.
And I turn this.
Okay.
Like this to give the bacteria more oxygen.
Okay.
And it will make a very good compost about several days. Which we use for our vegetables.
So that's the temperature, like a thermometer.
Yes, and this is microcomputer.
Okay.
Connected to the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
So that I can monitor the temperature.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm a newbie to this green life. Why we will need to monitor the temperature?
Because I need to decide when to turn this.
Oh.
When the bacteria is need more oxygen, the temperature starts to drop.
Okay.
Then I turn this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
How long does it take for you to make this compost?
About a week.
A week.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
But I can drop after a week into this box and keep it for about maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
So that's the natural fertilizer, is that right?
Yes.
Oh.
This is where I make firewood.
He's a love about fabrication.
Okay.
Okay, he's back.
Thank you for showing us your project. Your compost projects connect you to the world. This is a good example from yourself.
Yeah, that's a good question. This is my experiment for LDP because we have a vegetable field where we grow our vegetables, and we use the compost to grow the vegetable, and we eat the vegetable to sort of use our bodies, and we use local rice husks and also leftover from our kitchen. So our energy comes from the sun to grow the plants, and it and so it cycles. Comes from the sun and cycles through the vegetable field and the compost system and our body. So it's a sort of closed cycle to use the solar energy locally, so that we don't have to depend on energy from outside our environment. So that's the important point.
So we don't have to transport like food from far away for consumption.
Right, that's right. And food and fertilizers and gas. We don't use any. So the important point is that all our energy comes from the sun, and it's stored in the plants and the soil. The microorganisms in the soil store the energy from the sun, and we should try to use those energy locally, so that we don't have to use resources from some other places.
ค่ะน่าสนใจมากนะคะว่า
That's a very interesting the way to learn to connect ourselves with life, ourselves with the nature. We see more of our like skill, our capability. The more we do, the more we see our capability. We also see the connection between us and the society. Like the example from the professor, as we are the consumer, we produce our food and consume it within our household. It's reduce carbon footprint, reduce energy from transportation, transport of the fertilizer, oil and petrol. There's a lot of energy that we use to transport just one set of food to us. This is the good way to reduce the waste energy. Just began with ourselves. Just began to do the local domestic product. It's kind of like expand our capacity for us to live with the ecosystem and environment more sustainable way. This might be a good way to live, because we are facing with many problem about ecosystem, about politics, about the resources. Everyone have effect on that. I would like to thank you, Professor Yoshiro, very much to give us a speech, and also his friend who has participated in the research that observe on the behavior of a student and people about the learning science. And he's like long-time friends of the constructionism in Thailand and outside of the world. In the normal formal constructionism forum, he often have a speech in there as well. And he used to be part work with our children in the local Thailand. Thank you for your contribution.
Network.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me, and hope to visit you again soon.
Yes, Thailand is now open our border, so traveling is possible now, and I hope we can see each other soon. Okay.